Hi, welcome to Hyper-V Recovery for the Unitrends Certified System Administration course. By the end of this module, you'll be able to identify your recovery approach and options. You'll also be able to recover your Hyper-V hypervisor. Let's take a look at determining your recovery approach. The first thing you always kind of have to ask yourself, once again, you've seen it in all these recovery modules, is where are my recoveries located? Where are the backups that I want to recover? Right? In most cases, they're going to be on your local appliance, or you're going to go off for long-term to cold backup media, right? Remember, that's two-phase recovery. Or if you've lost everything at your local site, you could go to the hot backup copy on a separate Unitrends appliance at a different location. Right? When we look at the local backup appliance, the key to that recovery is that all backup catalogs are kept ready for recovery on that local system. I mean, whatever type of backups you're running, it keeps those catalogs. You can immediately turn around and recover and test and audit your recovery processes. Now, cold backup copies, you have to import those catalogs back to the source. Now, if you've already ran the backup copy off, that catalog stays on the system, but you can remove those catalogs, and the catalogs stay on the media as well. So you can re-import the catalogs, then you re-import the backup to that appliance first. The backup has to be re-imported. It's called an imported backup. Then you turn around after that, and the normal recovery operations, they're all the same as if it were a local backup on the local system once you import it. Now, the secret of the hot backup copy recovery is that those backup catalogs, after they're kind of copied over there, they're kept ready for recovery on that offsite system. The trick is you just need to make sure that you have that hardware, once again, off-site, ready to go for this type of recovery. So you need to have Hyper-V host registered to your target so you can recover your copied, hot Hyper-V snapshots. Now, when we look at what type of recovery you need, there's different types of recovery you can do from Hyper-V snapshots. You can mount and do file-level recovery. Right? It allows access to the share after you mount it. You can copy out anything for Windows and Linux, once again. I'm going to show you a little bit of that in the demo. Now, you can also recover an entire VM. So if you need to put the entire virtual machine back, it's not really urgent. You just want to kind of put the machine back, native kind of restore. You can put it back to the same or an alternate location. All right, we're going to go into a little bit more of the recovery options as we go through these as well, too. Now, if you want to put back the entire VM instantly, Hyper-V does allow for this. And it's back using the host resources within minutes. And we allow you to do that in both live and audit modes. Okay, I'm going to show you audit mode in the demo. So make sure you check out the demo piece later on. Now, Hyper-V Instant Recovery is not supported for the host component, that ASMAN security database for Hyper-V backups. You don't even really need to back that machine up anyways. So I tell people just don't even back it up. You can't do anything really with it anyways. Last kind of question is, where do you need to recover your data to? Depending on what type of data you're recovering, you have different options. Once again, if you're going after file and folder, you have to manually copy out that data from the share. But you can do that to any location, replace any data. Applications, databases, file and folder, entire volumes. Granular recovery from the snapshot. Now, if you need to put back your entire VM, once again, you can go to the same or a different host and alternate location too. And that instant recovery could be the same or different host. And remember that the new VM is created with the same name as the original. There's no suffix. In live mode, you cannot rename the VM during recovery. The original VM is overwritten by the recovery operation if it resides on that same target, on that same host. It will be overwritten. There are prompts in there in the Satori interface as you go through this as well too, but there are some caveats for you. Now, when we start to break down instant recovery mode, there's live instant recovery, just instant recovery, and then there's audit mode you can do. Okay, both modes create a disk image and a new virtual machine from the recovery point that you choose to whatever host you choose. Now, we break it down a little bit more. The instant recovery can assume the role of the original and make it available immediately. That's what's really cool about this. Your downtime is the time it takes to boot the machine. It can replace a failed or corrupted VM within minutes. Live instant recovery is used for production. It does have the network configuration active, and the next scheduled backup from the system will automatically be promoted to a full from the schedule. And when we break down audit mode, it's kind of used to test this stuff. It's used to verify your recovery points. You go in and audit every once in a while, put it on a schedule. It only takes a few minutes to audit these things. There's no impact to the original VM, and it's not used for production. The network configuration is disabled, and the changes are not backed up. It just keeps running whatever schedule you have. Now, there are some requirements if you are clustered for Hyper-V. The target Hyper-V server determines the cluster status of the new virtual machine. Right? Your host is going to determine where that machine goes. To create a clustered VM with IR, you must select a cluster as the target Hyper-V server. If you choose a member node that's not part of the cluster, you choose one of the individual member nodes. If you don't choose the cluster, you choose one of the individual member nodes, that new WinIR is not going to be clustered because it doesn't see it through the cluster manager. You also have to make sure that when you create a clustered VM with instant recovery, you have to make sure that you select the network switch that's common to all those nodes within your cluster as well too. Or else, once again, it can't see and move around the cluster within the cluster manager. So, make sure you're setting these up appropriate if you're going to a clustered Hyper-V environment for it. When we look at recovering a full Hyper-V guest, you're going to choose your incremental, your full, your imported backup. We talked about coming back from a cold copy too. You're going to import it back and choose it or go to the newest points, whatever you're going to do. Now, when you check that point in time to do guest recovery, the VM is going to be restored back with your configuration, whatever you tell it to. It's going to have to do the full and each recovery point to get the machine up to date. Right? The system creates a job for each VM recovery point, plus the configuration too. You have to wait for all of these recovery points to finish before you go and power up that machine. Now, keep in mind, when you power up that machine, it's going to have the same IP. It's going to take over that machine. You just clone the machine into production, basically. So you want to make sure you do things like disable your network or go in and change the IP right away when you get a duplicate conflict, right? However you're going to handle that. Usually people will disable it, go in and change the NIC, and then re-enable it. To do a guest recovery, you'll need to be able to verify your Hyper-V environment first. What host are you going to go to? Is it big enough? Verify you can do all this. Then make sure you do allocate your Unitrends instant recovery storage space. For Hyper-V and VMware recovery, they're both common. You don't have to allocate the full size of the virtual machine. We're only using our disk as kind of temporary storage to expand out. So really only about 25% of your used space for whatever you plan to put into Hyper-V instant recovery all at once. If you plan on doing 2 machines and they're 100 gigs, I'd probably give it about 50 gigs to make sure those machines do instant recovery properly. You're going to allocate that instant recovery storage space. Make sure you got enough in there. Once again, about 25% of total used space. It doesn't have to be the total plus 25, just 25% of used for Hyper-V guests. Then make sure you create that guest recovery job, pointing to the host, pointing to the appropriate storage that has the space, the network configuration, and you create that job. It puts the machine back with all the original configurations. Now, when we talk about verifying your Hyper-V environment, your Unitrends appliance, it's always recommended to make sure you run the latest releases. Same thing with the agent. You always want to make sure in this case, Hyper-V Instant Recovery is supported on 8.0 or higher, but really you want to make sure you're always running the latest version. All right, make sure you check your Hyper-V server that you're going to be hosting the VMs. Make sure it's registered so you can use it as a restore target for the Unitrends appliance. Not just install the agents, but you do have to make sure they're registered as an asset so you can use those as a restore target. Now, the restore target then is the Hyper-V guest itself. Once again, it can be Windows Server 2008 or higher with Hyper-V roles enabled. And it can be, of course, Hyper-V Server 2008 or higher as well, too. Now, for Generation 2 virtual machines, it has to be Windows or Hyper-V Server 2012 or higher. You cannot do Generation 2 to any 2008, if you read that backwards. It is recommended that you restore to a Hyper-V server whose version matches that of the original where possible or higher. You really can't go backwards. Right? You can't even go from 2012 to 2008, especially Generation 2. Now remember, you are coming off of a backup copy. It could be imported back as a local backup or a backup copy of a VM as well too. You can bring those back from media, and then once they're on the local appliance, you can restore those out as well, just like a local backup. Now the guest recovery process, you're going to identify the guest you want to recover. Once again, you're going to make sure that that guest and the processor memory, the network requirements, you can see all that. What are they? Then you're going to verify that you have a host that meets all those same requirements. Also, you're going to make sure you're following the Hyper-V best practices for guest recovery as well too. Then you're going to go ahead and identify your backup or your recovery point that you're going to use for all this restore. If you have to import one back, then import it and then go to that imported backup copy. You're going to put in all your desired options once again, like your target, that's the host. You're going to choose your storage, and then you run the job. It once again restores with the original network configuration based on how the machine was backed up. So all you have to do is tell us where you want to store this thing and which host to use processor and memory from. Next, we're going to watch the how-to video tutorial on recovering a file and folder in Hyper-V Backup and recovering an entire Hyper-V backup. Let's take a look at recovering an entire VM instantly. To do an instant recovery, you'll need to once again verify your Hyper-V environment, same as with the guest recovery. You're also going to make sure you allocate once again your instant recovery storage space. Once again, we talked about that earlier. Make sure you go through and allocate 25%, 30% of your used space of what you plan to put in there all at one time. 2 or 3 machines equal 200 gigs. You'd put in 25% of 200. Right? Not like file level Windows agent-based instant recovery where you have to put in 25% greater than total used space of the machines. A little bit different. All right, a little bit different process. You'll see it in the demo. You're going to learn how to create instant recovery jobs, and we talked about it earlier. There's 2 ways you can do them. There's live and audit modes. We're going to break both of those down for you as well too. Once again, when you allocate your Unitrends instant recovery storage space and you're going live from the physical Unitrends appliances, the recovery series, it comes with a set amount of backup storage, and then out of the backup storage, you can allocate and increase and decrease the amount of storage used for that instant recovery. It takes it out of your backup storage. All right, once again, on the recovery series, backup storage, it can't be added to the appliances, so you really have to make sure you're planning ahead and thinking ahead and be realistic of what you're going to use for instant recovery storage space off the appliance. Make sure you're thinking about the Windows instant recovery through the agent, Hyper-V, and VMware instant recovery. Add them all up, what you plan to use all at once, and that's what your instant recovery storage space is going to be. Make sure you look at all 3 of those modules if you're using all 3 platforms. Now, for the Unitrends virtual appliances, they're deployed as virtual machines once again, and after the initial deployment and during the initial install now, you can allocate that backup storage, and you can make it however big you want. When you look at this process then, if you know you forgot to allocate instant recovery or it grows and you need to allocate more storage, the cool thing about the virtual appliances is that you can add more storage later on, and then that same storage is then shared and used for instant recovery. So it makes managing them a little bit more flexible, but you do lose a downside of the instant recovery from the agent side of going to the appliance. Once again, just remember that. But it is a lot easier to add when you're dealing with a lot of virtual snapshots and virtual instant recovery, and you need a little bit more for that, and you can't afford to rob your backup storage, then you can allocate some additional storage after the fact. Now, instant recovery process, once again, you're going to identify the guest you want to recover. First step, who am I lost? You poke your server, it's down. You're going to determine and look at that guest. How big is it? What resources do I need? What network configuration? And that's going to determine which host I go to. Right? And you're going to verify that the host that you plan on going to meets those requirements. Once again, you're also going to make sure you're following Hyper-V's best practices for that recovery process. You're going to then identify a backup or imported backup through the catalog once again. You're going to see that in the demo. All right, then we go to the VM instant recovery options, and then from there we can choose live or audit mode. We choose our target location. We choose our network configuration. You can actually modify this a little bit through the instant recovery process. And then you can actually, in live mode, choose the network switch, right, for live mode as well too. which is really cool. In audit mode, that goes away. You can only do the network configuration, tell it which network you want to use for this audit. Now, when you run that job, it's going to go through a process of building that machine, booting it up within minutes. It's up and running, whether it's live or audit. If it's live, it's going to assume the role and all that stuff. We're going to talk about some of that stuff next. Now, make sure that when you're done with these, you tear down these machines to get the resources back, especially if they're audit mode. Be careful tearing down live versions. Right? When you tear down live, the Unitrends appliance utilizes the storage live migration to copy that virtual disk to the new host, right? Wherever you point it to back in that earlier step here. Right? When you choose your storage, that live migration process is going to migrate to that storage you just chose. Now, once that migration completes, then you tear down the recovery option, but you want to make sure you tear it down from the appliance only. Because in audit mode, you're going to verify that the machine boots. Right? You're going to log into the screen, check the OS out, whatever you're going to do. Then you can delete it from the target host manually if you want, and then tear it down from the appliance. But you'll notice in the tear down or the remove options now in Satori, it gives you the option and says, hey, do you want to delete this from the host, the Hyper-V host, and the appliance, or just the appliance? And in audit mode, I think it makes you do both. And in live mode, it gives you the choice of either or. There's a couple of instant recovery best practices here for you as well, too. You want to make sure you perform instant recovery audit mode to verify that these things are working. And if you have to, make sure you're importing some backup copies. Make sure you can get to those, too. Make sure these things are working. Right? Don't just rely on a hope and a prayer. You want to make sure you repeat this procedure as you bring on new machines and you test new backup strategies as well, too. You make a change to a machine, you change the configuration, run a new backup, and test that recovery point to make sure all this is still working for you. And once again, remember to tear any of these down whenever you're done, whether you're doing file-level recovery or any type of instant recovery, live or audit. Make sure you're tearing them down from the appliance so you gain some of those appliance resources back when it's all done. Okay, so make sure you tear that stuff down. Next, we're going to watch the how-to video tutorial on how to perform Hyper-V instant recovery.